Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's the show going? Good, good, good. All right. So, in case you're lost, this is the session today. This is what we're going to be covering. A little bit about kind of what we wanted to do is just really focus our conversation around demand resource forecasting best practices, but really from the context of real life. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about kind of who we are, what we do, real world examples. Beth is actually our delivery lead, and she is the one who's going to be giving us a bunch of the examples around kind of best practices. An implementation plan, the idea, of course, is hopefully there's something you can take away, a little nugget that you can take away with you. And then Q&A, lessons learned, key takeaways that we're seeing, especially as we engage with a lot of people around kind of improving their forecasting, their ability to predict, their ability to be much more efficient and get more into the modern world of demand planning and forecasting. All right. Our team, just so you know, when we're running around, so you know who we are. Martin Bogus. Martin is our fearless leader, if you will. He kind of leads the manufacturing and supply chain practice within Hitachi Solutions. I focus on our field service capabilities. Beth, you want to introduce yourself super quick?
Sure. I'm, as Michael said, I'm in delivery lead in our analytics, IoT, machine learning, all things data area of the business.
She is the person with all the knowledge in the room. So it's been great. It's actually kind of been, we weren't sure we could get her here because she's involved in a very large customer right now, but we were lucky enough to be able to get her here. So thank you, Beth, for helping us out. And the rest of the team, you'll see us kind of in our booth down on the floor. All right. This is going to be super quick. You know, if you don't know who we are, come see us. Basically, what we do is our field service practice is pretty big, pretty broad. Over 16 plus years in field service deployments, 15,000 users worldwide. One of the things that really we focus on is that we kind of go cross vertical rather than just a single focus vertical. The benefit of that we're seeing is that we're seeing a lot of commonalities across the verticals that hopefully you'll see today. End-to-end in the manufacturing space, end-to-end, so we touch on all of these. The idea here, of course, is that one of the best practices you're going to see is the fact that we're taking kind of this end-to-end view to be able to get better resource forecasting and demand planning. All right, just a couple of our customers. Actually, Beth, do you want to just kind of comment on one of them that you're working on here?
The one up in the corner, global office product manufacturer using ML to predict consumables. And it's a rather large project that we're working on right now where we're using a lot of IoT and other data sources to come up with a series of models that will do things like basically predictive failures on machines, but also things like what is the life expectancy of this consumable, so as part of the replenishment process and trying to make that much better. Because today there's a significant gap in what they're able to build versus what's being shipped out. And so we're working to really improve that process.
Yeah, we're actually gonna kind of show some examples as well of work that we're doing there. Yeah.
All right, so this is a client that we worked with where HVAC organization basically was more of that break fix kind of model. It's broken, you're on a service contract, I'm going to come in and kind of work through this. But we actually were able to hook into a lot of different IoT devices that were in the coolers, and we're able to optimize not only the dispatch model and how things were being processed, but we also changed the model around for giving you basically predicting, okay, for this type of failure, here are the most likely products that are going to be parts that you're going to need to go out for your field technicians for them to repair this. So it was really changing that organization from being you got a service contract with me and I'm gonna come back out and fix something when you call me, to more of, okay, we're gonna have a contract and I'm gonna prevent downtime on your coolers. So it's really been, the biggest opportunity, as we like to say, with this project was more of a organizational change management and a financial, like how do we handle the finance of changing how we're doing business? How are we going to change how we're engaging our field technicians? How are we going to optimize that? So it was really the implementation of the technology was actually the simpler part of the process. And this one's kind of an interesting. So in this case, large company goes out, sends out trucks to fuel up oil tanks across the country. And literally, the whole process was, the guy would go out, kick the tank, say, okay, it's about half full, it's a quarter full. He'd write it down, go back into the office and say, okay, need to dispatch somebody else to go fill this tank. Well, it might be that 2 days later there was a tank that was near there that also needed to be filled, but nobody knew it because nobody had gone to kick the tank to find out what the level was. So
That is the term, by the way,
yeah,
kick the tank.
Kick the tank. And so put sensors in there and basically create a lot of different things here. Optimize the routing, optimized in terms of, I don't have this guy going out all the time to check it, and then my trucks are going out and not filling up everything in the area. So really been able to transform how they're doing availability of the fueling, as well as kind of, reducing their cost from a standpoint of, I don't have trucks and people going out all over the place all the time. So, and we've also put the foundation in so that we're going to start implementing more ML to really optimize more on the routing, as well as, okay, can we predict based upon past usage the likely date of this tank needing more fuel, so that we can go through and even optimize some things there from a predictive standpoint on that demand planning. So
That's great. So in those case studies that we just kind of went through, one thing you'll notice that Beth keeps bringing up over and over is prediction, right? And what we're seeing is a lot of that, the industry, demand planning, resource planning, kind of is moving to that side. But before we get there, you want to just kind of, so we wanted to just ask you guys, so in your organization, who's kind of responsible for the more resource and demand planning? Is it more an operations perspective? Is it sales? Is it more the analytics team? Like, who's kind of doing that? Just curious. The customer?
I like that.
That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What? All of the above? All right.
And then today in your organizations, is a lot of this done in Excel? Or stick my phone up and like, okay, all right. And are you starting to get a lot of pressure in your organization to be more efficient because of either your competitors are starting to do things like use ML, or your customers are demanding it because they want to have, better efficiencies in their operations? Is it kind of equal, or is it one more than the other that's starting to drive your organization?
For us, it's the latter.
Okay, it's your customers. Okay, and is it for them that they're wanting to, decrease their cost, or basically they want to decrease their downtime, they want to have more responsiveness?
For us, it's more about capacity and what's available in the network and the need for more.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Anybody else?
Okay.
Okay.
So I think, one of the things that we are definitely seeing, there we go, is the transition really moving from, on the left side, if you think about kind of that's the current world, if you will, right? Pretty straightforward. The context of understanding what happened, then that kind of affects your plan. This is all about the capacity, as you mentioned. Utilization, then you kind of impute some growth perhaps, right? Maybe add 10% and then just keep on doing it, right? This is kind of the state of the world, if you will. But what we're seeing, and that Beth has already been kind of moving, kind of alluding to quite a bit, is a notion of what we're helping our customers with is really kind of adding those two layers in the ride, right? Which is, why did it happen, right? Whatever it is that we had planned to happen and what actually happened, understanding and narrowing down to why did it happen. And then based on that, being able to understand that correlation to get into what's going to happen next. Right? And this is that prediction model that Beth is kind of showing us and discussing with us. One of the things that we found that to kind of move up this kind of value chain or this maturity scale, if you will, is there's kind of 5 key things that we find are really, really important, that they keep on showing up over and over again in a lot of the engagements that we do. And you can see them on the left here. What you'll notice is that as we go through this kind of next steps is moving from a silo, from a strategic alignment perspective, to making more of a strategic value, moving kind of more to data quality, making that piece a practice. The ML and AI is important, but also being able to actually, in a very sophisticated way, complement your internal expertise and mix that in with your internal capacities is actually the bigger skill, which Beth will kind of show us in a second. Change management, obviously, and then the continuous improvement in designing that into your process is going to be vital as well. And we're seeing that kind of be kind of the key things that are coming out in a lot of these projects that we're doing. Anything you want to add before that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a journey. And I talk to people that you're not going to immediately get to that higher level. It's going to take time. So be patient. Failures are actually good. So learn from those. That's always important. I've worked with companies that, it's taken them years to get to that point. And then I've also worked with companies that's taken maybe a year, just based upon what they were able to do. But, I've also worked with companies that have never been able to get there because they try to move too quickly. So.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about the first bit of that, the strategic alignment. And full disclosure, we were going to actually show you some of this live. And then when we got into the room, we realized there's nowhere to plug in the laptop. Mm-hmm. So
come see Michael later.
Yeah, come see us later.
And then
we'll show you. Beth, I'm going to touch on this a bit, and then I'll add to it.
Yeah, so on this one, basically, this is just an example of where we had something we built for a customer where it was looking at, okay, we think that from a planning standpoint on parts replacement, we're going to have X, Y, Z in terms of our value. But, are we taking into account enough of our customers and their alignment and what they wanted to do? And then also overlaying that with what are some of the strategic goals that you have as a company versus sort of those operational goals. My operations team may be like, okay, I've got to have, this in terms of my fulfilling, but maybe my strategic goal is to move to a completely different model when it comes to break fix. So this is kind of a heat map where we were going through and overlaying a whole bunch of different things to kind of almost do like a what if analysis where the client could kind of go in and put different factors in to kind of see this. Because, having that strategic alignment, having your executive levels buy into this is very important because they're the ones that are, kind of supporting and writing some of the checks and those kind of things. So you need to have that buy-in because this is going to be somewhat disruptive on the business, and it's not something that's going to happen, as we said, overnight. This could take, a year, maybe more. There's going to be a lot of, there's a lot of things to grow into this. So you've got to have that support in terms of what you're planning and how this is going to feed into your 2020 goals or 2025 goals, whatever those might be.
So this is based on, if you can see this, really around the traditional view around utilization, right? So we've got 60% utilization, but now we're injecting things such as not only how much time, how well utilized these technicians are, we're now injecting the concept of what is the value, dollar value of that time, right? So per I wish we could show it to you, but you can come see us later. But the idea is that, for each hour or for each structure of work order that you want to put out, right, what's the most profitable one? That's really the question you're looking to answer. So therefore, which ones should we either invest in more, hire more, so that this feeds into that entire strategic idea of which work orders are the best things for us to work on, which ones are we making money off from, which ones are we losing money on from, and then that kind of determines a lot of their planning and their strategy and their hiring and their training around the organization. So we can show you this later on if you're interested.
So data quality, data governance. I always say this is critical. I'm not going to be able to come up with good models and good solutions if the quality of the data that we're working with is very poor, very suspect. When we're looking at things, when we're looking at could we use ML or AI or different things and some of the things we're wanting to do in the future, I always talk to people about like, okay, I run into all these people, we have 10 years worth of data. I'm like, okay, well that's great. How good is that data? How comfortable are you with that data? Or have you changed your business processes in the last 10 years that the patterns that I might see in that data really aren't as valuable as they could be? I always talk about sometimes less data is more valuable than more data because it's more reliable. It's better data. You have to understand, and Michael put this in there. I had a customer one time, it's like, well, we want the best practices. And I'm like, I can't give you best practices. I can give you best practices for you, but I can't give you what I might give for somebody else because you're not at a maturity level that's going to be able to utilize this. So data is very important in this whole concept of what you're doing for your demand and your capacity planning. Because if I don't have that, if I don't understand different things around what I'm going to do with that, how can I monetize that data? It's great that I've got 10 years of data, but can I take that and monetize it? And that there's going to be a life cycle with this data. Not all data is good data. Not all data is valuable data. So you really have to look at this in your organization and figure out, do I have anything? How good is it? How much of it do I have? Or do I need to start putting processes in place so that the data that I am collecting is going to give me better results in my models in the future?
Let's talk about model. Mm-hmm. So the next thing that the next factor that we see quite a bit of is, and so this is just, if you walk down this room, everybody's talking AI, everybody's talking ML. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing is the level of maturity the organizations have around understanding it, AI and ML, and the ability to incorporate that into your operations, into your business is actually just, if not the more important skill than the actual technology itself. So the 5-step model on the very left, right? Pretty self-explanatory. One of the things that we're seeing over and over again, budget your time. You're going to spend a lot of time on number 2. I don't know how many models you guys have built or are planning to go into, and what initiatives you're planning to do around AI and ML. What we're seeing over and over again, definitely number 2, people don't budget enough time for that. The ability to kind of clean it, prepare the data, and manipulate it correctly. And because everything down the chain actually then kind of really relies on that. So budget to spend time there if you're going to spend a lot of time, if you're budgeting your timing and your effort. Anything else you want to add to the?
Well, the other thing I would say is on that train your model. A lot of times when we're developing things to help us forecast out and look at demand and capacity, it's not just one model. Not all of your customers are the same, right? So a lot of times we'll find models that might work better for one type of industry or for one line of, one type of segment or different parts of the country or different parts of the world. So that's one thing I always talk to people about is that you're probably going to spend a lot of time looking at training your models or working with your models because you're going to find that it's probably not going to be just one. It's going to be different ones that you're going to want to look at or deploy for your solution.
The other thing too is that what we find is that you need to incorporate things like your best practices need to incorporate things like gut feel. a lot of forecasters and planners, we actually incorporate it in the context of we want to make sure we give people the opportunity who are actually very experienced in it to not only take the AI models and the outputs, but also be able to incorporate their field adjustments. All right. So if you look at this kind of step ladder maturity model here, right? The idea of, we spend a lot of time in thinking about detecting, IoT connectivity, and then putting in the frameworks. We've got a bunch of people here doing that. Then the analysis, of course. But the idea of having the output actually collaborate with your experts, your internal organizational experts, is so valuable because then you get your model actually then going ahead and training correctly, right? And then to be able to create those actions, the correct actions, right, right from the start. So this is another one of those we were going to show you in practice, but you can come see us. But Beth, go ahead. This is your baby here.
Yeah. So this was from the example of that HVAC that we talked about a little bit earlier. And the main thing I wanted to point out here was, so this was, part of this was the recommendations model on, okay, this type of failure, here are the recommended fixes, and here are the parts that you might want and the likelihood that this is the part or the problem. So this is a model that's kind of used in sort of real time in some of the dashboarding and some of the analytics. But this is also the same kind of model that feeds back into the forecast side. So I'm looking at historical data over time to analyze typical failures, to look at, well, what were the parts that were used? What was the labor time? Did certain technicians do better than others when they came into it? So that same model that I had to overall to figure out like my demand and my capacity, pieces of that model also fit into my ongoing real-time situation of where my, the guys are out in the field, something's come up on the dashboard back at the home office or for the guys in the field, and there's this potential failure that's going on, and here's what we think it is, and here's what you need to do to go fix it. So it's not just the models that you're developing for your demand and capacity. Just think those can also go into sort of that everyday monitoring and what you're doing. So it's a very valuable, and it's something that you can think about like, oh, if I'm doing this here, why can't I use it in this other part of the business? So that's important thing to think about. And here again, we were going to show it, but not, sorry.
We can show you later.
Show you later.
So if you think about this from an end-to-end context, right? So your demand planning, your resource planning, right? But now you're going from that, now you're actually connecting that to the action model that those technicians are supposed to do, right? Now you have a recommendation engine, right? That recommendation engine then feeds back into your predicted success of fixing this particular issue, which is obviously important. But then you can correlate this back to what you're planning to do next time. Because if you follow these steps, it's supposed to do this. It's supposed to fix 96% likelihood of fixing it. If that doesn't fix it, then you're learning from that model. You're learning something new from that data point, and then you're now updating your learning models as you go. Okay?
So some of the key takeaways that we talk about when we're looking at AI and machine learning and what you need to do in your organization is when you're kind of looking at it, know what you're trying to predict. Am I wanting to focus on parts? Am I wanting to focus on my technicians and how I want to plan schedule out and what I need to do? Am I going to try to focus on predicting failures based upon past failures within my organization? So know what you want to try to tackle. And know how to measure what is good and what's bad. Well, is this the right thing? Is this not the right thing? Is this really a bad answer? Is this a good answer? When it comes out of it. Know how to define what is success and failure. Okay, I've got this model, I'm measuring it, we implemented it, okay, we were at 75% accuracy. Well, okay, good, not great. Good if in my previous model was 50% or my manual process was 50% accurate. But know how to define that. Also know how to have a plan around reviewing that results. This should be continuous. As I talked about a little bit earlier about models, and you're probably not going to have just one. You need to have a process in place to review those models on an ongoing basis, and use that to constantly be evolving and changing what you're doing, because theory, you should be getting new customers, you should be getting new things that are going on in the organization. You should be constantly looking at, well, how can I improve my efficiency here? Maybe I've got new technicians and I'm going to see differences based upon how they're doing things. So plan for that. And then another thing that I was talking about is know the grain of the data that's going to give you a good solution. So if I go down to the part, does that give me more data than I need? If I'm looking at something at a certain product hierarchy level based upon your organization, is that good enough for your planning purposes in terms of some of the things that we want to do? So sometimes I always say more data is not necessarily better, because it's not going to give me the results that I'm expecting. It's just going to kind of clutter things. And then if you do have good historical data, use that as you're training your models. Okay, my model suggested this. Well, let me go back and look at some of my history, and is that what I saw? So if you have that, that's great. If you don't, then I would say, well, start with small subsets. Start with maybe a recent 2 or 3 month window of data that I can capture, and let me start training that and understanding it as it's going to go along. But there's a lot of things where you can apply a lot of different models, and then you want to figure out okay, well, which model is giving me the best model? And that could bring in additional data points. It could be by trying different regression models and different methods. Days to failure, days to consumption, days to end of life, depending upon what you're doing. And so know that it may not just be one model that's going to solve everything.
Perfect. So change management. I think we're all familiar with this particular best practice right here. What we wanted to do is just kind of share some of our kind of learnings from a lot of the projects that we've been doing. And I think some of this will be quite self-evident for you guys. But Beth, you want to just add to this?
Sure. So this kind of goes back to some of the things we talked about earlier. I usually say, all right, what are we doing today? Well, we're sort of reacting based upon, we get a call, we get something, this is scheduled, whatever. So really understanding what our current state is. And then kind of saying, all right, well, if we were capturing real-time or near real-time data, okay, let's see what that can do. Then if we've got historical data, let's bring that in for our ML and AI to see what we can do. And then start enabling that machine learning to start giving us some predictive, maintenance and forecast models for different things. And then start bringing in other data points to see what the impact is. Okay, well, if I bring in historical weather trends, does that have anything to do with help me out better? If I bring in data from automotive for historical data about the makes and models and the years, age of cars in an area, what does that do to me if I'm doing something from an automotive standpoint? So looking at different things that might come into that model, kind of taking that forecast and automating it so that it's repeatable and it's not somebody manually playing with this every time. And then in the end, kind of review that. Did I achieve what I expected? Did I see any operational efficiencies? Did I see increased revenue from that? But you notice up there it says start small, learn and adjust. That's something I always tell people. Don't try to do this maybe on a large scale. Look to take a subset. Look maybe a specific group of customers or a region or something and start there. Learn about the factors that affect that, and then constantly go through that. Well, did this give me what I need? No. Okay, well, what was the difference here? Let's analyze that. It goes back to that knowing knowing what's good, knowing what's bad, knowing what does success look like, what does failure look like. That's very important in this process. So.
Yeah, and this is really touching on, from the traditional, your actuals, what happened. This is really touching on why did it happen, right? That's what kind of Beth is kind of introducing into this little kind of start small concept of putting that into your process flow immediately when you start.
And then back to some of the things we've talked about. One model is probably not going to meet all your needs. It's probably going to be a couple of different models that are going to feed into your demand and your capacity forecast. Constantly review and adjust them. I always say it's not a one and done. You need to be looking at this all the time to do it. Review it for improvements and adjustments on a reasonable time frame. A lot of times I'll run into somebody and we'll work with them and they're like, every day they're wanting to adjust the model, and I'm like, you probably don't have enough data at this point to be doing something on a daily basis. You may not even have any information to be doing something on a weekly. It may take you a little while when you first start out. It might take you like a month to get a good degree of data or more, out there to really understand it. So, definitely kind of look at what is reasonable for making changes in your model and growing it. I mean, I do have some companies I've worked with that have got to the maturity level that they're basically going through and looking at demand and all their capacity almost in a real-time scenario, because they know their customers, they know their data, they have really good models, and so they can really adjust on the fly. When weather conditions are impacting them or some natural disaster is occurring, and they know how they can adjust things in their system.
All right. So there's a couple of things that, as we were kind of thinking about this in the context of what's the most important things we can share with you guys based on all the projects that we're working on. It's really the context of there's kind of a couple of key things that show up over and over again in terms of success in moving to a more predictive model, prescriptive model, and becoming much more tight with your demand and resource planning. So you kind of start out from, if you think about the context of the strategic alignment, the data quality that Beth mentioned and the governance around that, putting in the planning in the concept of gut feel, I think it's another important thing. Making sure your experts inside your organization are involved in the loop of this learning model as well is really, really important. Anything else you want to add, do you think?
No, good.
Or we kind of covered it, I think.
Yeah.
And so this some lessons learned that we feel has proven to be kind of consistently helpful for a lot of the initiatives that our customers go through when they think about moving to a more prescriptive space and predictive space. The alignment, C-suite, obviously, putting that in, obviously that's vital. Starting small, start smart, right? Start small, do a POC if you like, if that's something that your organization can support. 90-day MVP approach, very, very, very wise. Be kind of realistic in your technology alignment goals and your technology consumption goals is also very important. Be comfortable with not knowing all the end states. I think that's also something, because what you'll notice is that when you embark down that goal is you'll find things come up pretty quickly. And probably the last one is probably even the most important, is that it's not just a project usually you're embarking on when you go down this road. It's quite a bit of a culture change as well.
Yeah, this is a program. It's not just a project. Should be ongoing.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. So questions?
And that was it.
Any questions at all? I think you just blew all their minds. Let's give a hand for Michael and Beth then.
Thanks.